Hi guys, and welcome to your third lesson of GCSE Sociology on our introductory unit. First thing I'd like you to do, a little bit of a lesson starter, is just to check how much you can remember from last lesson. So it's a memory platform, a really quick one. I'd like you to pause the video here, or the PowerPoint, and complete the following sentences. So number one, the term culture means. Number two, values are. Number three, an example of a value is. And number four, norms are. Number five, an example of a norm is. So you need to know those definitions and you need to know examples. Pause here, answer these, and send them over with the rest of your work at the end. Today's lesson is looking at a debate that's quite sort of popular, quite well known. You may have touched on this in science as well as sociology, and it's called the nature versus nurture debate. So we're going to have a look today at both sides of that debate. And by debate here, what I mean is argument or opposing views. So it's not a debate where people are standing and shouting at each other with different ideas. It's a theoretical debate, an idea where you might believe one thing and someone else might believe another. So if you pop the title down and the learning objective and try and date your work, it helps us to keep it organised. And then we'll crack on with today's lesson. So the debate is, do we act and behave the way we do because we are born to do so, i.e. it's our nature, it's our biology, or do we act the way we do because we've been taught to do so by nurture, the agents of socialization, the people around us who help us to grow, our family, our education, and things like that. And there are two very strong arguments for this. There are very strong arguments on the nature side, and there are very strong arguments on the nurture side. So what we're going to have a look at today are both sides of that debate. So nature is the first side of the argument I want to have a look at. Nature is the idea that our behaviour is determined by our genetics, by our genes. Some scientists suggest that we inherit behaviour traits from our parents. So just like we we get our eye colour from our parents or hair colour, we also might get our behaviour traits. So have a think, are there things you know run in your family? A good sense of humour, being grumpy, not liking certain foods, things like that. Some scientists argue that all of these things we inherit from our parents. They also go further to say that things such as sexuality, intelligence, and maternal instinct are all coded in our genes. So when we are born, the DNA that's there dictates already who we are and what we're going to be like and what we're interested in. There's a video link on here I'd like you to have a look at next. It's a story of the Jim twins. If you're watching on YouTube, it's on the playlist, so you can just crack through and get to Professor Winston there in the middle, talking about the example of the Jim twins and how they are an example of the nature side of the debate. The other side of the debate is the one that sociologists tend to fall on. And sociologists tend to believe that nurture is more significant and more important, and our human behaviour is more learned than born into us. So they would argue, sociologists argue, that individuals are socialised into the culture of their family and society and taught how to live in society by the people around them. They would argue that your intelligence and your maternal instinct are a result of nurture, so the upbringing that you have. And the main argument they have is that if behaviour was natural and biological, every society would be the same. But actually, we have huge cultural diversity, and that means there are huge numbers of diverse societies, as we looked at last lesson, with different norms and different values. And surely if our behaviour was all biological, we'd all have the same. So sociologists tend to fall more on the nurture debate, and they'd say that your upbringing is the biggest factor in determining your behaviour. So just have a think about that for a second. Would you be the same person you are now if you'd been brought up in a different environment, if you'd been brought up in a different country with different parents, with different siblings? Would you be the same person that you are now, or have you learned to be who you are because of the upbringing that you've had? One of the ways that sociologists like to look at the importance of nurture is by studying feral children. You've probably heard of these ideas. It goes all the way back to Romulus and Remus, the twins raised by wolves. Feral means wild or unsocialized, as in they've not had their key elements of their upbringing. And we'll look at socialization more next lesson to build on this. But feral children are children who have been removed from human contact and have missed out on human interaction in the very early stages of their lives. So often feral children have been raised by animals, or they've been neglected and left to fend for themselves. So they've not learned social behaviour. And they're unable to participate as humans within their society. So they really struggle to fit in, and they struggle to interact with people, to use language. They haven't been taught the norms and values that they need to fit into a society. And sociologists argue that this means that human behaviour is learned. It's not something that you are born with. If you don't have these early influences, then you don't have the norms and values to fit in with society. So, task today then, and you've got a choice here depending on how much time you have. You can choose either activity 1 or either activity 2. So 2 video clips I've attached. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, they're in the playlist, so you don't need to go searching for them anywhere. Jeannie Wiley was a feral child to a certain extent. She had a very interesting upbringing. That video is 12 minutes long. It's actually a section of the longer video. And then on the next slide, I've put some questions. So if you only want to spend 12 minutes watching, you can watch the Jeannie documentary and answer the questions on the next slide. If you've got a bit longer, I'd suggest having a look at the full documentary. It's called Wild Child, Feral Children. It's only 43 minutes long, and there are some questions on the next slide. There's only 3 questions, whichever one you choose, but it covers more than Jeannie. It covers other children who've had interesting upbringings. My year 10s last year loved this video, and we spent almost a whole lesson watching it and discussing it. So I'd suggest, if you can, and you have got that extra half an hour, have a watch of that. But if you're a bit pushed for time, then go for the Jeannie one. So to finish, if you watch the Jeannie documentary, can you just write out for me, 4 sentences will help with your notes. Number 1, what happened to Jeannie? Number 2, what did Jeannie not learn as part of her upbringing? And number 3, how much progress was Jeannie able to make once she was being cared for? So that process of teaching her norms and values, how much progress was she able to make? It's an interesting thing to think about. And then the Wild Child documentary, number 1, who was Oksana and what human behaviour did she not learn? So what happened to her and what did she learn? Very interesting case there. Victor was also talked about. What human behaviour and emotions did Victor not have and why? And number 3, you can write about Jeannie for a little bit as well. What had Jeannie been unable to learn and why? So totally your choice. Which set of questions you do based on which documentary you watched. I really look forward to reading your responses. There's been some fabulous work so far. Well done.